Pacific Standard Time is a member-supported podcast from the San Francisco Standard.
Join today at sfstandard.com/member.
Okay, I'm recording a voice memo. So I am just seeing news that 5 immigration judges were fired today from San Francisco Immigration Court. Even in the light of all the immigration judge firings that have happened this year, including at this court, this is shocking news. The court is already hobbled by so many immigration judges being let go and so many cases still piled up in this backlog of people who've been waiting for years and years to see a judge. The fact that 5 immigration judges have been fired today without any clear plan for how to adjudicate the cases that are still in the backlog is shocking.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, Jesse.
So, as you know, I'm an immigration reporter here at The Standard, and I spent a lot of this last year at San Francisco's Immigration Court. And Emily, it was a wild time there. Seeing ICE detaining people in the hallways outside of court, watching lawyers watch their clients get pulled into these side rooms and sent to other states shortly thereafter. But one of the most shocking things that happened in court was when the Trump administration fired a group of immigration judges in the spring.
And that was still during the Doge era. So some people might have thought it was just cost savings and wouldn't continue, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then, a few months later, this longtime judge, one of the highest performing judges in the whole country, she gets fired. And so that's when we realized that the Trump administration wasn't just trying to cut the budget. They were trying to cull the federal immigration bench.
And it's not just happening here in San Francisco.
No, it's happening across the country, and it's still happening here. On the Friday before Thanksgiving, the Trump administration fired 5 more immigration judges from San Francisco's immigration court. So right now in San Francisco, there are only 9 immigration judges left. At the start of the year, there were 21.
Jeez.
I've been an immigration reporter for 10 years, and in that whole time, one immigration judge has talked to me, because judges very rarely talk to reporters. But in the last few months, I've talked to nearly a dozen immigration judges, because for the first time, these judges are speaking out about what's happening at the courts.
In a normal workplace, you don't get memos every Friday telling you that half of you or so are doing a bad job, and you don't have your colleagues fired for no reason in the middle of the workday, despite the fact that up until that point, they'd received nothing but accolades.
So this week on the show, Emily, I want to bring you a conversation I had with one of these fired judges who's now willing to talk to the press. We talked about why she thinks this mass firing is happening and what it means for our immigration system as we know it. This is Pacific Standard Time.
I'm Shira Levine, and I was an immigration judge in the San Francisco Immigration Court from September of 2021 until I was fired on September 3rd of 2025.
So, Jesse, tell me about Shira Levine.
So Shira, like a lot of immigration judges, actually used to be an immigration lawyer, which means that she was at immigration court all the time helping undocumented people get asylum or other forms of deportation relief. And it's that experience being in front of immigration judges, seeing how they carry out their duties, that really inspires her to want to become an immigration judge herself.
I would hear people who'd come in who were in removal proceedings, which is the technical word for deportation proceedings, who would tell the stories of their lives. So people would come to court because 25 years ago, something went wrong with a visa application, and now they were at risk of deportation, and they were seeking a waiver to continue to live here. But in hearing that, I'd hear about the past 25 years. I'd hear about their work as a nursing aide and having risen through the ranks because of their successful work caring for elderly people. I'd hear about what they did on their kids' baseball team, bringing snacks every week. For years, as I heard cases, the government was thoughtful. There were cases that came to me where, for example, a woman had suffered horrific domestic violence in her home country. She had tried to live somewhere else and was unable to. And this is not a specific case. These are broad brushstrokes of a large pattern of domestic violence cases. And I would turn to the government's attorney, and the government's attorney would let me know that their position was that not only had the non-citizen met her burden on asylum, but also that she merited a positive exercise of discretion. Because prosecutors have a duty to look at the law and uphold the law. And so many of the attorneys in my courtroom who were representing ICE, who were representing the Department of Homeland Security, were careful to look at the facts, look at the statute, understand that Congress had enacted the Refugee Act so that the United States would provide legal protection for those people who have a fear of persecution. And it was notable that to me as a judge, the courtroom was not being treated as a deportation factory. I worry that that duty to uphold the law and make sure that the courtroom is a place that claims are fully listened to is eroding.
Now, Jessie, there's something I want to ask here quickly. The immigration court and immigration judges are different from other judges, right? Because they're not part of the judiciary? Is that true?
Exactly. I mean, they're still judges. They still make decisions according to the law, and they're supposed to still have judicial independence. But immigration judges and immigration courts are under the executive branch of government, meaning that, in other words, the president and not the judiciary are the top authority when it comes to immigration courts.
You're in the Executive Office of Immigration Review, or EOR, like the Pooh character. And in practical terms, it does limit your independence. So first of all, federal judges are appointed for life. I was not appointed for life. You're also under changing policies.
So let's talk about how things start to change when Trump comes into office. What, for you, are the first signs that you see that things are different? And when did you start to see these things?
The first sign to me was that my first supervisor, Judge Elizabeth Young, who had been a terrific mentor and had really done a lot to teach me to be a good judge, was pushed out of her job. So her being pushed out was really notable. She is an expert in her field. She had been in charge of national trainings. She'd effectively managed the immigration court in San Francisco, and she'd been promoted. That was really a sign that there was a desire to destabilize the courts and remove people who had the institutional knowledge.
So this is alarming.
So for Shira, this is a sign that big changes are happening at the immigration courts. And then she starts getting these very strongly worded emails from her bosses at DOJ that make her wonder if she'll even be able to continue to be a judge ruling independently.
Oh, God. Hell always arrives via email.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't still here. It is smog. I'm Pat Morrison, and I've been breathing LA smog for, a long time. Join me to find out how this airborne garbage finally changed and how it changed us, with scientists, innovators, comedians, politicians, and a gal who drove around LA with her convertible top down and her gas mask on. Smoglandia will be available soon everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Transgender kids have been in the headlines a lot recently, but they rarely get to tell their own stories. Join us on the California Report magazine for a limited series called Love You for You. We'll listen to trans and non-binary kids talk with the adults in their lives about what it means to thrive with love and support.
Thanks for letting me be who I am.
Thank you for letting me be your parent and for letting me love you.
From KQED, find the California Report magazine wherever you get your podcasts.
Tell me about the memos that you received from your bosses at the Department of Justice. Like, was there one that was especially jarring or impactful for you?
One such memo dealt with impartiality in immigration court. This was directed toward judges who knew that their job was to hear both sides and to do their best to interpret the law fairly and uphold due process. And yet, this memo highly implied that a large sector of immigration judges were biased, and the word used in those memos, of course, for aliens, and then said that immigration judges who were repeatedly ruling for aliens, even when that's not what the law says, and this is a paraphrase, I don't have the memo in front of me, should stop being immigration judges and should instead become policy advocates for aliens. It was really weird to be at work in a job where I had had only stellar performance reviews and to receive a memo implying that a large sector of judges were doing their jobs poorly and perhaps should consider another line of work, and essentially have my bosses tell judges that many of us were biased. This was so different than the communication that we had long received of immigration judges from our supervisors and even from former Attorney General Merrick Garland that thanked us for our work, for our service, for our dedication, that understood that immigration court can be grueling. It was very different to turn to Memo Fridays and receive a barrage of emails in your inbox that essentially told you, you're doing a bad job. Well, some of you guys are doing a good job, but a lot of you guys are doing a bad job. That is a very odd position to be in as a federal employee.
So, I mean, let's talk about that. I think that obviously the Trump administration is saying explicitly that certain judges, because of their percentages of granting asylum or other forms of deportation relief, are not doing their job. You granted relief for nearly 98% of cases. And so I guess what would you say to someone who said you are biased?
So I think there's a lot of reasons that there's such a wide divergence in grant rates of immigration judges. People having attorneys or not having attorneys. People being eligible for the relief they are seeking. Certain criminal convictions will bar you from eligibility. The vast majority of people in my court had no criminal convictions. Those are all objective reasons. But I want to get to the core of the issue because I think that those reasons are unsatisfying to people. And I think that those explanations should be unsatisfying to people. So going back at least to 2006, when the wide range of grant rates became public, there was a public outcry. There was a law review article published called Refugee Roulette, which essentially highlighted that you could walk into one courtroom and have a much lower or much higher chance of being deported than if you walked into the courtroom next door. And to anyone who holds the understanding that justice should be fair and even and blind, this was a problem. Part of why that is, I believe, is that the law that judges are interpreting has remained vague and unstable. And a lot of why that is because immigration law is being made within the executive branch.
I'm curious because even at the San Francisco court, there are judges who grant asylum release less than 50% of the time. And presumably, they're also seeing immigrants who also are probably around the same rate of representation and are in the same court. Are you more empathetic than those judges?
I think it is primarily a reflection of different legal interpretations. So I think part of what's missed is that there are longstanding principles of asylum law, but many of those have not been fully codified in our system, and it leaves a lot of discretion and a lot of area of interpretation for judges. Of course, empathy is also part of the story People bring their own selves to work every day. There's no doubt, and the statistics bear out, that different judges grant differently. Judges who've represented non-citizens are not always sympathetic to non-citizens in court. There's lots of examples of judges who come from representing non-citizens who deny at extremely high rates. For me, I looked at each individual, and perhaps because of my own history or my family's own refugee history, my grandmother was a 9-year-old Jewish refugee from Nazi-occupied Belgium. I could imagine being in the shoes of another person. I could imagine sitting in court with my child. When I looked at kids in the courtroom, I wanted them to feel like their parent was treated with dignity. And sometimes the process had so stripped the non-citizen of dignity in the system, I wanted them to hear that I saw their parent as brave. These children needed both to look up to our American system of justice and feel like their family had been treated fairly. And I also wanted them to know that they should look up to their own parent.
You know, hearing from her, it's really striking how she brings so much humanity to a system that otherwise sounds really inhumane at times. And so as she's going through all this is when she's receiving the memos. But when do the firings start to happen in SF Immigration Court?
The first firings at SF Immigration Court happened in April of this year.
And was Shira one of the first judges to be fired?
No, she was fired months later, so she actually had to watch several of her colleagues get fired, which, according to her and other judges I spoke to who also were in the same situation, was really tough.
I was really surprised because everyone was doing a full docket. And what we'd been hearing was that there were problems with the backlog and we need to hire more judges and we need to work more efficiently. One of the first judges who was fired was Judge Brazil, who was an excellent judge, incredibly thoughtful, so knowledgeable about immigration law, and so hardworking. And when she left, nothing happened with her cases. You know, they were reset not decades, but 5 years into the future. It was surprising. It was destabilizing. It was a cautionary note. Even more shocking to me was when Judge Isla Dice was fired. When I joined the court, one of the first judges I met was Judge Dice. She was assigned to be my mentor, which was an official role when you come on as a new judge. So that was really even more shocking because she was not probationary. And it was...
When you say non-probationary, her job was already permanent.
She was permanent.
She wasn't she didn't need to impress anyone, especially, right?
Right. And I was permanent. So normally, though, just for clarity, probationary judges were not fired unless they hadn't performed well. Now, when we see probationary judges fired, they've performed in an excellent fashion. But the firing of long-term judges showed that there were no guardrails, that really this was just political ideology driving these terminations with an intention to totally dismantle the immigration courts and to create a frictionless deportation machine.
At this point, when firings are happening all around you, what are judges saying to each other? What is the mood amongst the judge corps at San Francisco Immigration Court?
I think that the firings turned the court from a effective, professional, vibrant, thoughtful place to a place where people were worried. I think people were worried about what they would say. I think people were worried about asking substantive questions in a Teams chat because we had this sense that we didn't know who was watching that chat. So essentially, it was chilling not just to people who were afraid to come to court. It was chilling to professionals who were used to discussing issues, asking questions, seeking help, offering help. And it became a place that felt, and I don't want to exaggerate, but a little bit oppressive. And when I would go into work every day, I knew I had a duty to serve the American people and to uphold justice, and that I would do that every day to the best of my ability for as long as I had my job. And it is truly what I did. But it did not feel like a normal workplace. In a normal workplace, you don't get memos every Friday telling you that half of you or so are doing a bad job. And you don't have your colleagues fired for no reason in the middle of the workday, despite the fact that up until that point, they'd received nothing but accolades.
So if you could take me to the day that you were fired, if you could describe to me where you were when you found out and how did you find out?
It was my third hearing of the day. So I'd heard 2 cases in the morning, and I'd finished both of those. I went out for a quick lunch break, came back, was in my third case of the day. It was an asylum hearing. The individual whose case it was had been waiting years, over 5 years, for his hearing. The Department of Homeland Security was asking questions on cross-examination. I was taking notes on my computer. I see an email pop up, subject line, something like termination. I tell the parties I'm going to take a quick break. I have the full termination letter. I can probably pull it up if you want me to.
I mean, if
Sure.
you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Okay. The first one said, "Please see attached." Dear Judge Levine, this notice serves to inform you that pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution, the Attorney General has decided to remove you from your position as an accepted service immigration judge with the United States Department of Justice, Executive Office for Immigration Review. Your removal is effective today. You are required to return all government property by the end of the day. Sincerely, Circe Owen.
Well, I mean, there's just no feeling in that. There's no good job, bad job. No, this is why. It's just cold-blooded.
Well, I wouldn't expect any less. Yeah, so I read that letter into the record because I believed that my termination was unprecedented, but also...
So just clarify. You see that letter and then you go back into the court.
Yeah.
And there are people there. I mean, there are immigrants before you sitting in court, like waiting for you to judge their case.
Yes.
And what do you do?
So that's exactly the point, what you said. This is someone's hearing that he'd waited more than 5 years for. It was one of the most important days of his life. So I still remembered my duty to hold a hearing with due process. So what I did was explain that I had been terminated, that unfortunately I was not going to be able to finish the case. And I also explained that through the interpreter and that he should be in touch with his attorney. And then I read that letter, which I just read to you, into the record because this was entirely unprecedented. But his case was not over. And I believed he had the right to have a record of what had happened in his case.
So that the next judge who opens up this case 4 or 5 years later knows that this is how this case ended up on their desk.
Exactly.
And then what do you do?
My friends helped me pack my office. I told them that I feel proud of my work as a judge. I told them that my grandmother had come to the United States as a refugee. And I walked out. Judge Dice had waited for me for 2 hours to pack my office, and she drove me and she said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "I'd like to go swimming." So we went to the bay and I jumped in the ocean.
It's like she cleansed herself. You've been specifically looking at firings in San Francisco and in California and thinking about the role immigrants play in California as like the backbone of this state and just so much like a part of our identity here. I wonder what you think about how this has a unique impact on the populations of people living here and also just on whether California feels like it's being targeted by the Trump administration for a reason.
Yeah, I think it certainly is being targeted for a reason. You look at California, it's the state with the largest number of foreign-born residents. You look at our laws here, you look at the precedent that exists in immigration law in California. It's some of the most liberal and forgiving and kind in the entire country. There's a reason that these judges have been granting asylum at such high rates, it's because of this legal precedent that's set here locally. But I think even more than the people and the institutions, this is an attack on the idea of what California is. It's not a coincidence that we have so many foreign-born residents here. It's not a coincidence that we have these laws here. I think it's a part of what many Californians feel is like a central value of the California experiment, is to be welcoming to immigrants. And so when Trump is coming after us for that very thing, I think it's an attack on what California stands for.
Thank you so much for bringing us this story, Jesse. This reporting is so important. And you know, I've been thinking a lot as you and I have been developing this show about what does it mean to be a Californian, and why do people want to live here? What do we put up with in order to live here? What are the hardships, and like, why do we do it anyways? One of my favorite memes is that photo that people like to share, or the like meme people like to share of a beautiful photo of California and then the words, "California, what a dump." Which I always think it's ironic, but also like things are hard here, but we all live here for a reason. All of which is to say, I would love for listeners to send us ideas for stories, because we have so many things we want to do on this show. And yes, we want to hear from you. What do you want us to talk about? What is the reason why you live in California? What is hard about it? What do you love about it? Send us all of your thoughts. This episode was produced by Eddie Sun and edited by Sophie Behrman. We used music by Carly Bond and Blue Dot Sessions.
The rest of our team is Gabrielle Burbet, Michelle Lanz, and Matt Collette.
We're a production of the San Francisco Standard. You can support this podcast and the rest of our great journalism, like Jesse's immigration reporting, by going to sfstandard.com/member.
Send us your story ideas. We want to make stories about things that you care about. Our email is pst@sfstandard.com.
And a great way to support our show is to tell someone about it. Share this episode with a friend and give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, and that'll mean more people will get to listen to. I'm Emily Dreyfus.
I'm Jesse Alejandro Cottrell.
And this is Pacific Standard Time.
Thank you for listening.